Not today. That was all, Miriam Strang said. She didn't look up from her phone. She just held up one finger, the way you'd stop a waiter who'd brought the wrong dish, and said it again, quieter this time, like the first answer hadn't been clear enough. Not today. The man standing in front of her desk was 23 years old, wearing a jacket that had seen better winters, holding a folder of documents she hadn't asked for and wasn't going to read. His name was Eli Caron. Lean, mixed race, dark eyes that didn't blink when people expected them to. He had a smudge of grease near his left wrist that he hadn't noticed yet. He worked maintenance at the Vantage Tower on King Street West in Toronto. Had for 2 years. Third shift. The kind of job where you learn the bones of a building while everyone else is asleep. What he was holding in that folder was a structural analysis. 37 pages, handwritten in the margins, printed at the library on Spadina because he didn't own a printer. What Miriam Strang hadn't asked for and wasn't going to read was the reason the east wing of her building was going to fail its next safety inspection. Badly. She was 51, senior property director at Halcyon Real Estate Group, one of the larger commercial landlords in downtown Toronto. Sharp blazer, sharper tone. The kind of person who scheduled her interruptions. Eli placed the folder on the edge of her desk anyway, quietly. The way a man places something when he knows it matters even if the person in front of him doesn't yet. There's a problem with the expansion joints on floors 14 through 18, he said. Water infiltration. The sealant's been failing since last spring. I documented it. Miriam finally looked up. She looked at his jacket. Then at the grease near his wrist. Then back at her phone. That's what the engineering firm is for, she said. The one we pay a significant amount of money to. They missed it. The silence that followed was the particular kind that happens when someone in a position of authority hears something they don't want to be true. A silence that is less about thinking and more about deciding how to shut the door. I'll pass it along, Miriam said. She did not pass it along. Eli walked back down to the basement. He punched back in. He picked up where he left off. He didn't say anything to anyone. What you need to understand about that moment is what was sitting inside that grease-smudged jacket pocket that Eli Caron never mentioned to Miriam Strang. A degree in civil engineering from the University of Waterloo. Graduated top third of his class. A professional engineer's license he'd been sitting on for 8 months because the firm that offered him a job after graduation lost the contract that funded the position, and the next 6 applications went nowhere, and then his mother got sick. And then the maintenance job opened up, and it paid weekly, and Zoe needed her medication, and that was that. He'd been fixing the bones of other people's buildings for 2 years. He knew every crack, every settling joint, every place where the rain found a way in. He noticed things. He always had. But nobody at Halcyon had ever asked what he knew. They'd only ever told him where to go. To understand why Eli Caron carried a folder of structural documentation to a director's office, instead of simply filing a maintenance report, you have to go back 14 years. Back to a kitchen in Sudbury, Ontario. A yellow kitchen with a drafty window above the sink that his mother, Yolande Caron, had stuffed with dish towels every November since he could remember. Eli was 9. He was sitting at the table with a library book open, the kind of oversized picture book that explains how bridges work, diagrams of trusses and load distribution, and the reason arches don't fall. He'd checked it out 4 times already. The librarian, a woman named Doris, who never once made him feel like he was taking up too much space, had quietly set it aside for him each time. Yolande came in from her second shift at the Highway Motel, where she changed beds and restocked soap bars. She set her coat on the chair instead of the hook because her back hurt too much to reach. She looked at what he was reading. "You're going to build things," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm going to fix things," Eli said. "Fixing is harder." She'd laughed, surprised. Then she sat down beside him, and he showed her why arches hold weight. She listened like it was the most important lesson she'd ever been taught. He never forgot that. The way she listened. The way she made him feel like knowing something was worth something. Even at a kitchen table in Sudbury, with dish towels in the window. He became a civil engineer because of that yellow kitchen, because of a library book and a mother who listened. And now he was in a basement in Toronto, replacing a worn gasket on a pump that could have been serviced 3 months ago if anyone had read his maintenance log. He wasn't angry. That was the thing most people didn't understand about Eli Caron. He should have been furious. He wasn't. He was patient, the way someone is patient when they know the truth doesn't expire. 3 weeks after Miriam Strang declined to read his folder, the East Wing failed a city inspection. Not dramatically. No collapse, no emergency. The building didn't close. But a municipal inspector named Carl Wymett walked floors 14 through 18 on a Tuesday morning and flagged 6 separate issues with the expansion joints: moisture penetration, compromised sealant, early stage spalling on the concrete surround. The engineering firm Halcyon paid a significant amount of money to write a report. The report said the problems had developed recently. Eli read the report in the break room. He didn't say anything. He finished his coffee. He went back to work. What he didn't know yet was that someone else had read his original folder. Owen Strickland was 44, VP of Operations at Halcyon, a quiet man with reading glasses he kept losing and finding in his own shirt pocket. He'd been CC'd on the inspection report. He was the kind of person who read things carefully and slowly, and who, unlike most people in his position, still occasionally walked the building himself instead of reading about it from the 24th floor. He'd found Eli's folder on Miriam's desk 3 weeks earlier. She'd left it there, unread, and had taken it, more out of tidiness than curiosity. Then he'd read it, all 37 pages. He'd sat with it for a long moment afterward, the way you sit with something when what you're reading is more precise and more thorough than what you're paying professionals to produce. Then the inspection report landed on his desk, and every single item on the inspector's list was already in Eli's folder. Documented, photographed, prioritized by severity. Owen Strickland went looking for the person who'd written it. He didn't call up to maintenance dispatch and ask them to send someone. He took the stairs down to the basement. Eli was replacing a fluorescent tube in the storage corridor when he heard footsteps that didn't belong to anyone he recognized. He turned around. "You're Eli Caron," Owen said. It wasn't a question either. "Yes, sir." "I read your report." Owen held up the folder. "The whole thing." Eli waited. "You wrote this yourself?" "Yes, sir. You have an engineering background." It wasn't quite a question. Eli answers it anyway. Pieng, Waterloo, 2022. Owen was quiet for a moment, not the dismissive quiet, the other kind, the kind that means something is being recalibrated. "Why are you down here?" he asked. Eli looked at the fluorescent tube in his hand. "Because the light was out," he said. Owen almost smiled. "You know what I mean. I needed work that paid. This paid." Eli set the tube down carefully. "I kept noticing things. I documented them. I thought someone would want to know. Miriam didn't look at it. I know." "She should have." "Yes," Eli said, "she should have. There was no bitterness in it." That was the part Owen Strickland would remember later. There was no bitterness in it at all. Just a statement of fact, the same way you'd say it rained yesterday. "We have a problem," Owen said. "The remediation on the East Wing. The firm we're using is quoting us for work that I'm not sure we need, and I'm not sure they understand the scope of what they're actually dealing with." He paused. "I'd like you to sit in on the meeting with them on Thursday." Eli looked at him. "As maintenance, as the person in this building who actually understands what's wrong with it." The silence that followed was a different kind. The kind that happens when a door opens somewhere you'd stopped expecting doors. "I don't own a suit," Eli said. Owen Strickland shrugged. "Neither do I. Most days. Come as you are." That night, Eli called his mother. She was in the same house in Sudbury, same drafty window now fixed. He'd replaced the seal himself the last time he visited. "Mama." Someone read the report. Yolande was quiet for a moment. Then, "Which report?" "The one I gave them 3 weeks ago. The one they didn't read. And now? They want me in a meeting. With the engineering firm." Another pause. He could hear her shifting in her chair. He knew that chair. He'd re-glued the leg twice. "Ellie," she said, "you've been ready for this since you were 9 years old. You just had to wait for someone who knew how to read." He didn't say much after that. He didn't need to. He pulled out his notebook. A small one, spiral-bound, the kind you get at a Staples for $2, and opened it to the section on the east wing. Pages of measurements, dates, annotated photographs printed small to save paper. The first entry was 14 months ago. He'd been watching this building fail in slow motion and writing down everything he saw. Not because anyone asked, because that was who he was. Thursday arrived. Word spread through the building, the way words always spread through buildings, fast, sideways, slightly distorted. The maintenance guy was going to the engineering meeting. The third shift worker with the grease on his jacket, somebody heard he had a degree. Somebody else said no, he just looked things up online. A junior coordinator in asset management said to her colleague over lunch, "Is this a diversity thing?" Nobody asked whether he was qualified. Nobody asked what he'd found or how he'd found it. They just filed him away under a category they'd already decided on. Eli arrived early. He always arrived early. He sat at the table in the fourth-floor boardroom. Plain jeans, clean, the same jacket. He'd polished his boots the night before because it was the thing he could do. The engineering firm sent 3 people: the project lead, a junior engineer, and someone Eli recognized immediately as the person who wrote the reports without doing the site visits. Miriam Strang was there too. She sat at the end of the table and did not make eye contact with Eli when he walked in. Owen sat beside Eli, a quiet signal that nobody had to interpret. The project lead, a man named Ray Biasolale, early 50s, the specific confidence of someone who had never been seriously wrong in front of anyone who mattered, opened his presentation. It was wrong. Not entirely, but the sequencing was wrong. The proposed remediation addressed the surface symptoms without going after the source. Eli knew because he'd watched the source. He'd measured it in 3 different weather conditions. He'd watched it get worse through a wet November. He waited. He let Ray Biasolale finish. Owen looked at him. Eli. Eli opened his notebook. "The water infiltration isn't coming from the joint's surface," he said. "It's tracking along the rebar channel from the parapet flashing on the roof. If you seal the joints without addressing the flashing, you'll have the same problem in 18 months. Possibly worse because the moisture will have nowhere to exit and it'll wick into the concrete core." Ray Biasolale looked at him the way a person looks when they've been told something they don't want to process by someone they've already decided not to take seriously. "And you're basing this on 14 months of observation." Eli turned the notebook around. Dates, measurements, weather conditions, photos. "The infiltration rate increases in freeze-thaw cycles. I can show you the progression." Ray looked at the notebook, then at Owen, then back at the notebook. The junior engineer leaned forward. He was maybe 26, and unlike his project lead, he read what was in front of him. He looked at Eli's measurements. He looked at the photographs. He looked at his project lead. "He's right," the junior engineer said, "about the flashing. We didn't do the roof inspection." The silence that followed lasted long enough to become its own statement. Owen Strickland leaned back in his chair, with the quiet expression of a man watching something he'd suspected was true being confirmed in front of witnesses. Miriam Strang looked at the table, then at the window, then at the table again. She didn't say anything, but something shifted in her face. Not admiration, not yet, and maybe not ever, but something in the vicinity of recognition. The deep, uncomfortable kind. The kind that happens when the story you've been telling yourself about someone turns out to be the only thing that was wrong in the room. The meeting ran 90 minutes. By the end of it, the remediation plan had been restructured. The scope was different. The sequence was different. The cost was, in fact, significantly lower because they were now treating the actual problem. Ray Biasolale shook hands around the table. When he reached Eli, he paused. "You should have been in the room 3 months ago," he said. It came out stiff, slightly resentful, which meant it was honest. "I tried to be," Eli said. Calm, no edge, just true. Owen walked Eli to the elevator afterward. I want to bring you on formally, he said. Not maintenance, technical advisory. You'd be reviewing site conditions, flagging issues before they reach the inspection stage, working directly with the engineering teams we contract. Eli looked at the elevator button. 3rd floor. He'd replaced the panel on this elevator himself. What would the title be? He asked. Something we'd figure out together, Owen said. Something accurate. That evening, Eli sat in the parking lot outside his mother's building in Sudbury. He'd driven up without telling her. He just needed to be somewhere familiar before he could figure out what he felt. Yolande opened the door before he knocked. Mothers do that. She looked at his face. She didn't ask any questions. She made tea. She sat across from him at the yellow kitchen table, under the light that still flickered sometimes when the furnace kicked on, and she waited. He offered me a real job, Eli said finally, an actual engineering role. Yolande wrapped both hands around her mug. And I don't know what to do with that yet. She nodded slowly. Yes, you do. He looked at her. She was 61 now. Her hands showed the years. She still worked, not the motel anymore, a grocery distributor, shorter hours. She'd never once told him he was aiming too high. She'd also never told him he was settling too low. She just watched him and trusted that he was finding his way. You've been fixing other people's mistakes for 2 years, she said. You've been doing the job without the title. You've been doing it without the pay. You've been doing it without anyone saying thank you. She set her mug down. It's not a question of whether you can do the job, Eli. You've been doing it. The only question is whether you'll let someone pay you properly for it. He opened his notebook to the first page. The first entry, 14 months ago. Handwriting smaller then, more careful, like he wasn't sure yet if documenting any of this mattered. Floor 14, East Corridor, Joint B7. Hairline moisture trace, approximately 30 centimeters. Weather, post-rain, 4 degrees Celsius, photographed. He closed it. I'll let them pay me for it, he said. Yolande picked up her mug again. She didn't make a production of it. She just said, good, the way she always said things that mattered. Quietly, without ceremony, like it was always going to be this way. What happened next moved faster than Eli expected. 2 weeks after the engineering meeting, Halcyon had a portfolio review. Quarterly, institutional investors, the kind of meeting where perception mattered as much as performance. 40 people in a downtown boardroom, including 3 representatives from a pension fund that held a significant position in Halcyon's commercial properties. Owen had put Eli on the agenda, not as a footnote, as a presenter. The title on the slide deck said Technical Risk Review, East Wing Remediation. Eli Caron, Piang. Miriam Strang saw the slide deck the morning of the meeting. She called Owen's assistant twice. Owen was unavailable. Eli arrived at the boardroom in the same boots, now repolished. He'd borrowed a blazer from Owen's assistant's husband. She'd offered without being asked, the same way certain people understand what the moment requires before anyone speaks it out loud. He stood at the front of the room. 40 people. Pension fund managers in expensive chairs. He talked about expansion joints. He talked about freeze-thaw cycles. He talked about parapet flashing and rebar channels and the specific way water moves through concrete when you're not watching it carefully enough. He talked about it clearly. He talked about it without jargon when jargon wasn't needed and with precision when precision was. He showed his documentation. 14 months of it. Dates, weather, measurements, photographs taken on his phone at 3 in the morning, because that was when he could see the moisture trace most clearly. He explained what had been missed, what it would have cost if left alone, and what the restructured remediation plan would actually fix. One of the pension fund managers, a woman named Christine Bolak, sharp-eyed, mid-40s, the kind of person who had seen many presentations and remembered the ones that told the truth, raised her hand. Mr. Caron, how long have you been in this role? A beat. Eli looked at Owen. Owen said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Officially, Eli said, about 2 weeks. Christine Bolak looked at the slide deck, then at Eli. And unofficially? 14 months, he said, give or take. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 40 people doing a quiet recalculation. Christine Bolak nodded once, slowly. I'd like to see this kind of documentation across the full portfolio, she said. To Owen, not to Eli, but her eyes moved between them. If it's this thorough everywhere, that changes how we think about risk on these properties. Owen said, we're working on it. He looked at Eli when he said it. Eli stood at the front of the boardroom on the 31st floor of a tower he had been cleaning and maintaining and quietly saving for 2 years. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Toronto spread out below him. The lake was gray and flat. The CN Tower, the Gardiner curving west. The city that had never once looked up at him was now, for a moment, looking up. He reached into his blazer pocket. The notebook was there. It was always there. Miriam Strang was in the back of the room. She had not said a word during the presentation. She said nothing when it ended. She gathered her things and left before the coffee service began. She came to see Eli the following morning, not in the boardroom, not in Owen's office. She came down to the 4th floor, where Eli now had a temporary desk in the corner of the technical operations room, a real desk, not a locker room bench. She knocked on the open door. Eli looked up. "May I come in?" she asked. It was the first time she had ever asked him for anything. He nodded. She stood. She didn't sit down. She held her portfolio binder against her chest, the way people hold things when they don't have a script for what they're about to say. "I want to be straightforward with you," she said. "I didn't read your report. I should have. I looked at who was handing it to me, and I decided it wasn't worth my time." She stopped. She looked at the window. That was wrong. Eli waited. "I'm not asking you to excuse it," she said. "I just wanted to say it directly to you, without anyone else in the room." The silence held for a moment. "I appreciate that," Eli said. "Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just acknowledgement. The kind that says, I heard you, and I'm not pretending this didn't happen, and this is where we are now." That was all Miriam Strang was going to get, and somewhere behind her careful expression, she knew it was more than she'd earned. She left. Her heels made no sound on the carpet. 6 weeks later, Owen Strickland circulated an internal initiative across Halcyon's operations division. He called it the Skills Visibility Project. The premise was simple. Every employee, regardless of role or title, would have the opportunity to log their professional credentials, certifications, and areas of expertise in a shared internal directory. Maintenance staff, security, facilities, administrative assistants, everyone. In the memo, he wrote, "We have consistently underinvested in understanding what our people actually know. This is a structural problem, not an individual one, and we are going to fix it the same way we fix anything else around here, by looking at it directly and documenting what we find." He didn't name Eli in the memo. He didn't have to. The day the memo went out, 43 employees updated their profiles within the first 2 hours. A security guard on the night shift turned out to hold a project management certificate. The woman who managed the supply orders for 3 buildings had a background in environmental compliance. A facilities coordinator had worked as a licensed electrician in Nova Scotia for 8 years before moving to Toronto and not being able to afford the recertification exam. Eli read the memo at his desk. He read it once, then set it down. He opened his notebook to a blank page. He wrote the date at the top. He looked out the window at the city. Then he wrote, Floor 31. Parapet inspection overdue. Added to Q1 schedule. And he got back to work. "I want to tell you something before you go. I think about the people in the building who walked past Eli Caron for 2 years. They passed him in the stairwell. They saw him in the parking garage. They held the elevator and then didn't hold it. Not out of cruelty, mostly, just out of the ordinary human habit of deciding who counts as someone worth noticing. And I think about how many buildings there are, how many organizations, how many warehouses and hospitals and school boards and restaurants where someone knows something important, something real, something that could change the outcome of something. And they've already tried to say it, and nobody looked up from their phone. The Eli Carons of the world are not rare. That's the thing. They are everywhere. The rarity is the Owen Stricklands. The people who take the stairs down instead of sending an email. The people who pick up the folder. If you've ever been told, in one way or another, to go back where you came from, whether that was a maintenance room or an entry-level desk or a phone call nobody returned, I want you to know that I made this for you, not as comfort, not as a promise that someone will come down the stairs and find you, but as a reminder that being unseen is not the same as being wrong. Your documentation is real. Your notebook is real. Keep filling it. And if you're someone who has ever left a folder unread, not out of meanness, just out of the ordinary certainty that you already knew what mattered, I'm asking you to think about that. Just once. Honestly. Leave a comment. Tell me about a time you were the person with the folder, or the person who didn't read it. Share this if you know someone carrying something that nobody's thought to ask about yet. Subscribe because every week we find these stories and we tell them the way they deserve to be told. Genius doesn't announce itself. It just keeps showing up. It polishes its boots the night before. It takes the early shift. It writes the date at the top of a blank page and gets back to work.